The Great Council Chamber on Nexus Prime was the oldest building in the known galaxy. It had stood for 12,000 years, and its walls had seen the rise and fall of countless empires. Every major species in the universe sent their representatives here to debate, argue, and make decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. Ambassador. Laura Bennett took a deep breath as she stood outside the massive doors. She was about to become the first human to address the full assembly of the Galactic Confederacy. Her heart was beating fast, but her face showed nothing. She had practiced this moment for months. "Ready?" asked Kevin Marsh, her young aide, who stood beside her. "No," Laura admitted. "But that doesn't matter. We go in anyway." The doors opened with a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the hallway. Laura walked forward into a space so large it took her breath away. The chamber was shaped like a bowl, hundreds of seats rising up toward a ceiling made of crystal that showed the stars outside. 347 different species filled those seats, and every single one of them was now looking at her. Laura had studied pictures of these aliens for years, but seeing them in person was different. Some were tall and thin, with skin that glowed softly. Others were covered in scales or fur or armor plates. A few floated in special tanks filled with water or strange gases. They came in every color, every shape, every size imaginable, and they all shared one thing. They were old. The youngest species in this room had been traveling between stars for 5,000 years. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. To these ancient beings, humans were babies who had just learned to walk at the center of the chamber. Raised above everyone else sat the 5 supreme arbiters. These were the eldest of the elder races, beings so old that nobody really knew where they came from anymore. High Arbiter Voroth was the most powerful among them. He stood twice as tall as a human, with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Humanity Vorath spoke, and his voice filled the entire chamber without any effort. "You have been called here to answer questions from the members of this confederacy. Do you understand?" Laura walked to the speaking platform at the center of the room. She felt very small standing there alone, surrounded by aliens who had ruled the galaxy since before her ancestors had discovered fire. "I understand, High Arbiter," she said clearly. "I am ready to speak for my people." "Good, then we will begin." Vorath gestured with one of his forearms. 17 member species have raised concerns about human expansion in the Orion Spur region. In 40 years, you have established colonies on 43 worlds. You have built stations and mining operations across hundreds of star systems. Explain your intentions. Laura had prepared for this question. "Honored arbiters, respected representatives, humanity seeks only to find new homes for our growing population. We have never claimed any world that was already inhabited. We have never taken territory that belonged to another species. Every system we entered was empty and unclaimed according to Confederacy records." A sharp clicking sound came from the upper seats. Laura looked up to see the Kethvari delegation rising to speak. The Kethvari were insect-like creatures with hard shells covering their bodies and sharp claws on their hands. They were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who had conquered dozens of species before their Confederacy forced them to stop. The speaker was a female warrior with dark red armored plates. Her name was Thraxia, and she commanded millions of soldiers. "The human lies," Thraxia said, her voice harsh and cold. "They have placed mining stations within 3 light years of our outer colonies. They watch our movements. They test our defenses. This is not peaceful expansion. This is preparation for war." Laura felt anger rise inside her, but she kept her voice calm. "The station's commander, Thraxia, mentions are in unclaimed space. We checked the territorial records before every expansion. There were no Kethvari claims in those systems. Claims can be unregistered," Thraxia replied. "Any species with true intelligence would recognize zones of influence. Any species with respect would keep their distance." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species seemed to agree with the Kethvari. Others looked uncomfortable with the accusation, but nobody spoke up to defend humanity. Admiral Frank Morrison, who stood behind Laura as the military representative, leaned close to whisper in her ear. They set us up. Those systems were deliberately left unclaimed to create this situation. Laura had suspected the same thing. This was not a fair hearing. This was a trap. High Arbiter Vorith raised his hand for silence. These are serious accusations. We will hear from all parties who wish to speak. This session will continue for 3 cycles. Ambassador Bennett, you will have opportunity to respond to each concern. The next several hours were painful. Species after species came forward with complaints about humanity. The Velanthi creatures who lived in water and communicated through flashing lights on their skin, humans of polluting a shared ocean on a border planet. The Drath Collective, a species that shared one mind across millions of bodies, claimed human traitors had infected their network with a computer virus. Laura defended against each accusation with facts and evidence. She showed data, proving the pollution came from natural sources. She demonstrated that the computer problem started months before any human ship visited Drath space, but it did not seem to matter. The other species had already made up their minds. During a short break, Laura gathered her team in a small room off the main chamber. "This is coordinated," she said quietly. "Every single accusation is either impossible to disprove or based on rules we could not have known about." Commander Patricia Gray, the intelligence officer, nodded. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I have been monitoring their communication channels. At least 8 delegations are using encrypted signals to talk to each other. They are planning something bigger than complaints." "What kind of something?" Kevin asked. His face had gone pale. "I do not know yet," Patricia admitted. "But the Kethvari have moved 3 war fleets to the edge of their territory. The Morvathi are pulling their merchants out of human space. These are not the actions of species expecting a peaceful outcome." Admiral Morrison spoke grimly. "They are preparing for war, or at least the threat of it." Laura looked at each member of her team. They were good people, loyal and smart. But they were also scared, and she could not blame them. "We need to contact Earth," she said. "The President needs to know what is happening here, because I do not think we are going to like what comes next." She was right. She did not like it at all. The second day of hearings began with more accusations. Laura stood on the speaking platform for hours, answering questions that seemed designed to make humanity look dangerous and untrustworthy. She kept her voice calm and her facts straight, but she could feel the mood in the chamber turning darker with each passing hour. Then the Kethvari, Representative Thraxia, rose again. This time, she was not alone. Representatives from 8 other species stood with her, their different bodies forming a strange wall of unity against the single human woman below. "We present a formal motion," Thraxia announced. Her voice echoed through the chamber with cold satisfaction. "Under Article 7 of the Confederacy Charter, we demand the imposition of a containment protocol on the human species." The chamber exploded with noise. Some species cheered. Others gasped in shock. Laura felt her blood turn to ice. She knew what containment protocol meant. She had studied the Confederacy Charter very carefully before coming here. Containment was the most extreme punishment the Confederacy could impose. It meant complete isolation. No trade with other species. No travel outside human space. Any ship that tried to leave would be destroyed without warning. In the entire history of the Confederacy, containment had been used only 4 times. Every species subjected to it had eventually died out. Some collapsed from lack of resources. Others were quietly invaded once they became weak enough. Containment was not a punishment. It was a slow death sentence. On what grounds? Laura demanded, stepping forward without waiting for permission to speak. What possible justification could there be for such an extreme action? High Arbiter Vorath did not rebuke her for speaking out of turn. His glowing skin had dimmed slightly, and his forearms were folded in what Laura had learned was a gesture of concern among his species. Representative Thraxia Vorath said, "Explain your reasoning to the chamber." Thraxia's mandibles clicked together in what might have been a smile. "The reasoning is simple mathematics. Humanity has existed as a spacefaring species for 40 standard years. In that time, they have expanded at a rate 300% faster than any species in recorded history. She pressed a button on her podium, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed human space growing year by year, spreading across the map like a drop of ink in water. They adapt to environments that would kill other species. They breed at rates we consider alarming. They consume resources without pause or consideration. Their population has doubled 3 times since they first left their homeworld. Thraxia turned to face the other delegates directly. Project their growth forward 1,000 years. Do the mathematics yourself. At current rates, humanity will have spread across half the galaxy. In 2,000 years, they will have reached every corner of known space. They will have consumed worlds that have belonged to our species for millions of years. She pointed one sharp claw at Laura. This is not a species. This is a plague. If we do not contain them now, while they are still weak, we will never have another chance. Containment is not punishment. It is survival. The chamber fell into chaos. Species shouted at each other in dozens of different languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up with the noise. Some delegates were calling for the vote to happen immediately. Others were protesting that this violated basic rights. Through it all, Laura stood perfectly still on the speaking platform. Her mind was racing, calculating options and outcomes. None of them looked good. Admiral Morrison appeared beside her. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "If they vote for containment today, they might not let us go." "They will let us go," Laura replied. "They want us to deliver the news to Earth ourselves. They want us to see our own people's reaction when we tell them the galaxy has decided to let us die." When Vorath finally restored order, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. "This is a grave matter, the most grave this chamber has considered in 1,000 years. Ambassador Bennett, you have the right to respond before we proceed to a vote." Laura looked around at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. Most showed hostility or fear. A few showed curiosity. Almost none showed sympathy. She realized something important in that moment. Nothing she said would change their minds. They had decided to fear humanity before she ever walked into this chamber. They had decided that different meant dangerous, that growth meant threat, that strength meant enemy, she could argue. She could plead. She could present evidence and make promises and beg for mercy. And they would vote for containment anyway because they were afraid. And fear did not listen to reason, so she did something else instead. "I request a recess of 6 hours," Laura said clearly. "I must consult with my government before responding to this motion." Vorath nodded slowly. "Your request is granted. This chamber will reconvene in 6 standard hours." As Laura walked toward the exit, Thraxia called after her. "Run back to your leaders, human. Tell them what awaits their species. And tell them that resistance will only make it worse." Laura did not turn around. She did not respond. She simply kept walking, her back straight and her head high, till the great doors closed behind her. In the small room where her team waited, she finally let her mask slip. Her hands were shaking. "How bad?" Admiral Morrison asked. "As bad as it gets," Laura replied. "They are going to vote for containment. Maybe not today, but soon. And once they do, we are dead. Not immediately, but eventually. The math is clear on that, too." Kevin Marsh looked like he might be sick. "So what do we do? What can we possibly do against the entire galaxy?" Laura took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "We contact Earth. We tell them everything. And then we find out if the contingency plans we hoped we would never need are actually ready." She activated the secure communication link and sent a coded signal across the stars to a facility hidden deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth, a facility that officially did not exist. The signal contained only 2 words: "Activate Prometheus." On the other end, in a room filled with screens and serious-faced officials, President Daniel Harris read those 2 words and closed his eyes. "God help us all," he whispered. Then he began making calls. Of his own, the facility beneath the Rocky Mountains had been built in secret over 15 years. It was buried so deep that no scanner could detect it. protected by so many layers of security that even most members of the government did not know it existed. This was where humanity kept its darkest secrets and its last hopes. President Daniel Harris sat at the head of a round table, surrounded by the most powerful people on Earth. Secretary of State Marie Foster was there, her silver hair pulled back tight and her face showing no emotion. General Catherine Shaw, commander of all human military forces, sat with her hands folded on the table. Vice President Henry Cole kept glancing at the screens on the walls, which showed the council chamber on Nexus Prime in real time, and in the corner, saying nothing, stood Dr. Samuel Price. He was a thin man with tired eyes and gray hair that had once been brown. He was the architect of Project Prometheus, and he looked like a man who had not slept well in many years. "Tell me exactly what happened," President Harris said to the holographic image of Ambassador Bennett. Who was speaking from across the galaxy? Laura explained everything. The coordinated accusations, the containment protocol motion, the hatred and fear she had seen in the eyes of species who had never even met a human before. "They have already decided," Laura concluded. "Whatever I say when we go back in there, they are going to vote yes. The only question is whether we give them an excuse to attack us right away or let them strangle us slowly over decades." President Harris turned to General Shaw. "Military assessment?" The general's face was grim. "If the Confederacy unites against us, we cannot win a direct war. We would inflict heavy casualties, but eventually numbers would overwhelm us. Our fleet is large for a species our age, but we are still outnumbered 1,000 to 1, so we simply accept death." Vice President Cole asked bitterly. "We roll over and let them murder our children and our grandchildren." "No," President Harris said quietly. "We do not accept death. We never have. That is why we built Prometheus." He turned to Dr. Price. "Samuel, is it time?" The scientist stepped forward, and suddenly he did not look tired anymore. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "Project Prometheus began 20 years ago," Dr. Price said. "Right after first contact, when we realized how the Confederacy worked, we saw that they treated new species like children to be controlled. We saw that any race that challenged their power was destroyed, and we knew that eventually they would come for us." He activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Thousands of tiny lights appeared across the map, scattered through Confederacy space-like stars, and what you are seeing are our hidden assets. Weapons platforms hidden in asteroid fields. Factory ships disguised as space debris that can build entire fleets in weeks. Surveillance drones embedded in communication networks across 40 species. Sleeper colonies in deep space that no one knows about. Seed ships carrying human genetic material and embryo banks, ready to rebuild our species if Earth falls. The room was silent. Even the president, who had approved the project, seemed shocked by the scale of it. "We have been preparing for this war since before most of you knew there would be a war," Dr. Price continued. "Every trade mission was also a scouting mission. Every diplomatic visit was also an intelligence operation. Every piece of technology we shared with the Confederacy contained hidden monitoring systems." "You have been spying on our allies," Secretary Foster said. Her voice was flat. "We have no allies," Dr. Price replied simply. "We have species that tolerate us and species that hate us. None of them would lift a finger to help us if the Confederacy decided to wipe us out. So we prepared to help ourselves." General Shaw was studying the map with new eyes. "Those weapons platforms, how many of them are operational?" "All of them. Over 8,000 positions across 17 key systems. If we activate them simultaneously, we can destroy 60% of the Confederacy's military shipyards within the first 6 hours of conflict. We cannot beat them in a long war, but we can hurt them badly enough that they might prefer to negotiate." President Harris stood and walked to the holographic map. He stared at it for a long moment, his face unreadable. 20 years, he said softly. 20 years of lying to the galaxy. 20 years of preparing for a war we hoped would never come. And now it is here." He turned to face the others. "If we reveal Prometheus, we confirm everything the Confederacy fears about us. We prove that we are exactly as dangerous as they claim. We prove that we have been deceiving them from the very beginning." Does it matter? Admiral Morrison asked through the communication link. They are going to try to kill us either way. At least this way, we have a chance. It matters because of what we become, President Harris replied. If we start this fight, we are no longer victims defending ourselves. We are a species that seeded enemy space with weapons of mass destruction. We are exactly the threat they say we are. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what the president was saying. There was no going back from this decision. Whatever humanity chose to do in the next few hours would define their species for centuries to come. Finally, Laura Bennett spoke from the holographic display.
Mr. President,
I have spent 2 days watching these species debate whether to kill us. Not because we did anything wrong, not because we threaten them, but because we exist, and our existence makes them uncomfortable. They do not see us as people. They see us as a problem to be solved. Her voice hardened. I do not want to be a threat. I do not want humanity to be remembered as the species that brought war to the galaxy. But I also do not want us to be remembered as the species that laid down and died because we were too afraid to fight back. President Harris nodded slowly. Then we do not threaten. We do not attack first. We do not become the monsters they expect us to be. He looked around the table at his advisors. But we also do not hide. We show them what we have built. We let them understand the cost of aggression. And then we let them choose. He turned back to Laura's image. Ambassador Bennett, you will return to that chamber and deliver our response. But it will not be surrender, and it will not be a declaration of war. It will be something they have never seen before. What is that, Mr. President? Daniel Harris smiled, but there was no warmth in it, the truth. The doors of the council chamber opened, and Laura Bennett walked in alone. No delegation followed her. No aides carried documents. No military officers stood guard behind her. Just one human woman walking into a room filled with 347 species who had gathered to decide whether her kind deserved to live. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Laura did not walk to the speaking platform where she had stood before. Instead, she walked to the exact center of the chamber, directly beneath the great crystal dome that showed the stars of the galaxy above. She stopped there and stood perfectly still, looking up at the representatives who filled every seat around her. High Arbiter Vorith leaned forward, his forearms unfolding from their ceremonial position. Ambassador Bennett, you requested time to consult with your government. Have you reached a decision regarding our containment protocol? I have, Laura said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily through the perfect acoustics of the ancient chamber. But before I share that decision, I have something to say to this assembly. She began to turn slowly, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could reach. For 40 years, humanity has tried to be good neighbors. We studied your laws before we expanded. We respected territories that were claimed. We traded fairly and honestly. We asked permission before entering systems that bordered on your space. We did everything we were supposed to do. Laura stopped turning and faced the Kethvari section directly. And what did we receive in return? Suspicion, contempt, accusations based on lies. And now, a vote to condemn our entire species to slow extinction. Thraxia rose from her seat, her mandibles clicking angrily. You were given the same treatment every new species receives. You were tested. You failed. No, Laura replied. We were set up to fail. Those unclaimed systems near your colonies? They were left unclaimed deliberately, waiting for us to expand into them so you could accuse us of aggression. The pollution on the Volante border world? It existed before our colony was established. The computer virus in the Drath network? It came from a Morvaith freighter, not a human ship. I have evidence of all of this. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. But I'm not here to argue about evidence, Laura continued. Because evidence does not matter to this assembly. You did not condemn humanity because of what we did. You condemned us because of what we are. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, a data crystal that fit easily in her palm. You called us a plague. You said we expand too quickly, adapt too well, breed too fast. You said we would consume the galaxy if left unchecked. Laura held up the crystal so everyone could see it. You were right. The chamber went completely silent. Even Thraxia stopped clicking her mandibles. Humanity is everything you fear, Laura said. We are aggressive. We are adaptable. We are relentless. These are not flaws in our nature. They are the strengths that allowed us to survive ice ages, meteor impacts, plagues, and countless wars against ourselves. While your species were spreading peacefully across the stars, we were fighting every single day just to exist. She pressed a button on the crystal, and a holographic display appeared above her head, showing the galaxy map with thousands of points of light scattered across Confederacy space. This is what we have been doing for the past 20 years while you watched our public expansion and congratulated yourselves on keeping us. Contained in a small corner of the Orion Spur, the points of light began to pulse and expand, revealing details. Weapons platforms, factory ships, hidden colonies, surveillance networks. The true scope of human preparation spread across the map like a revelation. Representatives throughout the chamber began to react. Some stood up in shock. Others started shouting in their native languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up with the chaos. You thought you were watching us? Laura continued over the noise. You were wrong. We were watching you. Every military base, every shipyard, every fleet movement, every encrypted communication. We have been learning everything about the Confederacy since the day we joined it. High Arbiter Vorith's skin had gone pale, shifting to colors Laura had never seen before. This is an act of war, he said, his voice barely a whisper. No, Laura replied. This is an act of survival. We knew this day would come. We knew that eventually the Confederacy would decide we were too dangerous to tolerate. So we prepared. Not to attack you, not to conquer you, but to make absolutely certain that if you came for us, you would pay a price so terrible that you would have to think twice. She pressed another button on the crystal.
I know.
This information is being transmitted to every military command in the Confederacy. They will see exactly what we have positioned throughout your space. They will see how icily we can strike at your core worlds. They will understand that the cost of war with humanity is not a victory, but mutual destruction. Thraxia had recovered enough to respond. You threaten us? One small species against the entire galaxy? Laura smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. I am not threatening anyone. I am telling you the truth, which is something this assembly clearly needs to hear. You can vote for your containment protocol. You can try to strangle our civilization. You can even launch your fleets against our worlds. But if you do, we will fight, and we will hurt you badly, perhaps badly enough that other species, the ones who have been waiting for the Confederacy to weaken, will see their opportunity and take it. She paused, letting her words sink in. So here is our answer to your containment protocol. We reject it. We reject your authority to impose it. We reject the idea that we need your permission to exist in this galaxy. Laura began walking toward the exit. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Confederacy. We will establish our own sphere, make our own alliances, write our own rules. Any species that wants to deal with us in good faith is welcome. Any species that threatens us will learn why we survived everything our own planet threw at us. She reached the doors and stopped, turning back for one final statement. You wanted to contain us because you were afraid of what we might become. Congratulations. You have shown us exactly what we need to become. Strong enough that no one ever tries to put us in a cage again. High Arbiter Voreth rose to his full height. You cannot simply leave. The charter, the protocols, the laws of this confederacy. Your charter? Laura interrupted. Your protocols, your laws. They were designed to control species like us from the moment we arrived. Well, you failed. And now you will have to live with the consequences of that failure. She turned and walked through the great doors. Behind her, 347 species sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. Galaxy had watched in terror as humanity left the chamber, and nothing would ever be the same. The data crystals. Content spread through the Confederacy, faster than any message had traveled before. Within hours, military commanders on 100 different worlds were studying the information with growing horror. On the Kethvari homeworld, War Commander Thraxus stood in his strategic command center, staring at a holographic display that showed his entire empire's defenses. Red dots marked the positions of human weapons platforms. There were so many of them that parts of the map looked like they were bleeding. 3 of our core shipyards are within strike range, his aide reported, her voice shaking slightly. If the humans activate those platforms, they can destroy our ability to build new warships within the first day of fighting. Did we miss this? Thraxus demanded. We have been watching them for 40 years. We have spies on their worlds. We intercept their communications. Their stealth technology is far beyond what we believed possible, the aide replied. They have been hiding their true capabilities since first contact. We were watching the wrong things. Similar scenes played out across Confederacy space. The Morvathi discovered that human surveillance drones had been monitoring their secure communications for over a decade. The Volanthi found detailed maps of their defensive systems in the transmitted data, maps more accurate than their own records. Even the ancient arbiters discovered that someone had been accessing their most private databases for years. Humanity had not just prepared for war, they had studied their potential enemies more thoroughly than any species in history. They knew weaknesses that even the Confederacy members themselves had forgotten. On Earth, the reaction was different. When Laura B. Net's ship returned, she was greeted not as a hero who had defied the galaxy, but as a woman who had just put her entire species in terrible danger. President Harris met her in his private office, away from the crowds and cameras. You did what had to be done, he said. I gave you those orders. The responsibility is mine. The responsibility is all of ours, Laura replied. She looked tired, more tired than she had ever felt in her life. I spent 2 days watching them decide to kill us. Part of me wanted to beg. Part of me wanted to apologize for being human. But in the end, I realized that nothing I said would change their minds. They had already decided to be afraid of us. Now they have real reasons to be afraid. Yes, now they do. Laura sat down heavily in a chair. Did we make things better or worse? Will they hate us more now, or respect us enough to leave us alone? President Harris walked to the window of his office and looked out at the city below. Millions of people going about their daily lives, most of them unaware of how close they had come to extinction. I do not know, he admitted, but at least now we negotiate from strength instead of weakness. At least now, they have to take us seriously. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy reorganized itself around the new reality. The Confederacy's vote on containment protocol was quietly canceled. No species wanted to be the one to trigger the hidden weapons scattered throughout their space instead. Diplomats began reaching out through back channels. The Kethvari, despite their hatred, were the first to propose formal boundaries. Each side would stay away from the other's territory. It was not peace, but it was not war either. Other species followed. Some wanted trade agreements, curious about the technology that had allowed humanity to hide so much for so long. Others wanted defensive alliances, hoping that human weapons might protect them from their own enemies within the Confederacy. Not everyone was willing to accept the new order. The Drath Collective sealed their borders completely and declared humanity a threat to be eliminated whenever the opportunity arose. The Volanthi began a massive military buildup. Several smaller species formed coalitions against human expansion, promising to unite if humanity showed any signs of aggression. The galaxy had entered a new age, an age where humanity was no longer a curious footnote in galactic history, but a major power that could not be ignored 6 months after the confrontation. Laura Bennett stood on the observation deck of Earth's first major space station, watching ships come and go. Human freighters, alien trading vessels, diplomatic shuttles, all evidence of a galaxy that was slowly, reluctantly, learning to accept humanity's existence. Kevin Marsh found her there, carrying 2 cups of coffee, You come here often, he observed, handing her one of the cups. I like to watch, Laura replied. It reminds me that we actually survived. Sometimes I still cannot believe it. The historians are already writing about it. They call it the Declaration of Sovereignty, the moment humanity announced itself to the galaxy. Laura laughed, but there was little humor in it. That makes it sound noble. I remember it as the moment I told 347 species that we would hurt them if they tried to hurt us. That is not sovereignty. That is survival. Maybe they are the same thing. They stood in silence for a while, watching the ships. Do you think we did the right thing? Kevin finally asked. Laura considered the question carefully. She had been asking herself the same thing every day since she walked out of that chamber. I think we did the only thing we could do, she said finally. They were going to kill us either way, slowly through containment or quickly through war. Our choice was not between peace and conflict. Our choice was between dying quietly and fighting back. She took a sip of her coffee and looked out at the stars. History will judge whether we were right. Maybe 100 years from now, humanity and the Confederacy will be at war, and everyone will say that my speech started it. Or maybe we will find a way to coexist, and they will say that standing up for ourselves was the only path to real peace, if history judges us wrong. Laura smiled sadly. Then at least we will still be alive to hear the judgment. That is more than the Confederacy was willing to give us. Far across the galaxy, in the empty council chamber on Nexus Prime, High Arbiter Varath sat alone in the darkness. The great dome above showed the same stars it had shown for 12,000 years. But they seemed different now, colder, more dangerous. He had lived longer than most stars. He had seen countless species rise and fall. He had always believed that the Confederacy was eternal, that its power was absolute, that no force in the galaxy could challenge its dominion. He had been wrong. A communication signal blinked on his console. It was from the other Supreme Arbiters, scattered across their ancient homeworlds. The humans have changed everything, said Arbiter Miliantha, her ethereal form flickering in the holographic display. What do we do now? Vorath was silent for a long time, thinking about the human woman who had stood alone in this chamber and told the galaxy that her species would not go quietly into extinction. We learn, he said finally. We watch. We wait. And we hope that when they finally decide what they want to become, they remember that we were not all their enemies. The communication ended, leaving Vorath alone with the stars. Outside the station above Earth, Laura Bennett finished her coffee and watched a human ship jump to faster than light speed, its engines flaring bright before it vanished into the darkness. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was watching, waiting, afraid. Good, she thought. Let them be afraid. Let them understand that humanity would never again accept judgment from those who did not have the right to judge the galaxy had watched. In terror, as humanity left the chamber, now they would watch in. Wonder, as humanity built its future among the stars, whether that future held peace or war. Cooperation or conflict, nobody could say. But one thing was certain. Humanity would face it standing up, its eyes open, ready for whatever came next. Because that was what humans did. They survived.